Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are tuning in from. We do appreciate so much that you're spending your lovely time here with us this evening because it is evening for us. I'm here with Gary, the man, the myth, the legend himself, hot off the streets.
Hot off the streets.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man.
Nice.
Doing
We
good.
also have Ryan in the house. He's hobbled, he's crippled, he can barely breathe, but he is here chugging along with us. How we doing down there, my man?
I'm good. I'm happy that everyone is here for once. It's been a rough couple weeks.
We're
Yes,
glad
it
you're
has.
persevering. It's good to see you.
Yeah, I'm surviving.
Good.
I'm
Good.
a survivor. That's what they say.
Yeah.
Queen
Just a
bee.
soul
Queen bee.
survivor, dude. Soul survivor. All right, well, boys, this is another off-season edition, and for the last few weeks we've been doing our division previews, but we figured in lieu of recent events, we would mix it up this evening. And boys, has there been recent events? Ladies and gentlemen, as Adam Silver likes to say, there has been a trade. We've spoken a lot on this pod, and we kind of skirted around giving predictions for two teams specifically, that being Philadelphia and the other being Portland. Tonight's episode will heavily involve Portland, as well as an Eastern Conference team in Milwaukee that Gary and I talked about last week. So go back and re-listen to that, and then forget everything that we said on that pod, because we're going to try to probably do it again, all right? So Portland has heard the trade demand from Damian Lillard, their star of 11 years there, the man who scored 71 points in a game last year and had a career high in points per game at 32.1 last season at age 33. He signed a 4-year extension that runs through 2026, I believe, taking him through his age 37 season. He'll be making upwards of $60 million that year. But he will not be making upwards of $60 million living in the Pacific Northwest anymore. Portland heard his trade demand, and as we know, he only wanted to play for Miami, and we all kind of thought, hey, maybe we pump the brakes, we take a minute, we see what the best offer coming in from is. And it turns out that was not Miami. It is, in fact, Milwaukee. Damian Lillard will be playing in Milwaukee alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton.
The Miami of the Midwest is what people call it.
I love it. Freak time is what I've heard.
Oh, that's an awful name.
Hey, right? So it's just some of the details around this trade, right? So Milwaukee, they obtain Damian Lillard. Portland gets Jrue Holiday, DeAndre Ayton from the Suns, who are the third team that I forgot to mention going into all of this. But the Suns are the third team in this trade, and they have offloaded DeAndre Ayton to Portland. Tamani Kamara, also from Phoenix. They get 2029 first-round pick from Milwaukee. They also get 2028 and 2030 first-round pick swap rights with Milwaukee. So you figure 3 players and 3 firsts, essentially, from Milwaukee, from a variety of teams. And then the Suns, they acquire Yusuf Nurkic from Portland. So Portland gets off that injured man's contract. They get my boy Grayson Allen. So right out the gate, Phoenix, big winner in this trade. They get Nasir Little, who played at North Carolina. So secondary at the gate, Phoenix maybe the loser in this trade. And they get the freak athlete Keon Johnson, also from Portland. Hasn't done a bunch, but he's an incredibly athletic player. All right, boys. Gary, I'll go to you first. Let me get just initial thoughts before we get into our version of Splash or Trash for this episode.
Yeah, my initial thoughts were like, this caught me off guard. I know last week we talked about the fact that like Giannis has talked about kind of putting the pressure on the front office, done it a little bit through the media, but not obnoxious like some guys do, but it has been kind of out of character for him. So I was surprised to hear that Milwaukee made this trade, but as I thought more about it, I was like, well, if I'm the Milwaukee front office and I have an opportunity to put a true superstar next to Giannis, do I feel like that's doing enough to kind of appease my, all-world top 3, 4, 5 NBA player, keep him happy, right? And And then I look at, what the upside is, right? I don't think that scoring has necessarily been an issue for Milwaukee. So at first I kind of was confused by the trade because I don't think that they really needed to add more scoring because they finished, I think, 6th in the league last year. They were 1st in the playoffs. I know they got eliminated early, but like on a per game basis, they were still scoring. But this is the NBA, right? And star power drives everything in the NBA, especially in today's NBA. So I get what Milwaukee's trying to do, right? You've got to find a way to keep Giannis there. And if this is the win that keeps him there, then you win twice, right? You add a superstar and you also keep Giannis in Milwaukee longer term, right? We all know famously about signing his brothers and stuff, but like obviously there's still some discontent there with Giannis with the way he's kind of floated some things out there. And then I started to look a little deeper into the trade. I think Portland made out really well. The news that they're looking to maybe move Jrue Holiday is not really surprising because I was wondering how they were going to work that with Scoot and kind of how that whole dynamic was going to work because I think they play a similar kind of role. Scoot's maybe a little more offensively minded than Jrue, but I think Phoenix did pretty well sneakily. I think they did pretty well rounding out their roster and getting rid of Ayton. They wanted to get rid of him probably 18 months ago. If they had their choice, he'd have been run off the roster 18 months ago. So I think overall, I get it from each of these teams' perspectives, right? Portland had to move him. Milwaukee's making a move. But my initial thought was, I just didn't see it coming. Milwaukee was never on my radar for Lillard.
That's fair. Yeah, it did kind of catch me by surprise as well. Milwaukee was not a team that I had in mind when thinking about landing spots for Dame. I know that I'm assuming that both of you guys probably thought that if there was going to be a large shakeup in Milwaukee, it would be Giannis moving out the door rather than staying in house. Ryan, do you have different thoughts than Gary, or just give me your initial thoughts on what this kind of trade means for the landscape of the league and how you think it turned out for everyone?
Yeah, I think it was shocking. I'll agree that they probably weren't even in like my 5 that I was like, he'll end up there.
Right.
And it happened really fast, I feel. I remember there was like a conversation that a reporter in Phoenix was like, Phoenix is really interested in Yusuf Nurkic. And I'm like, that's kind of wild to me that was the only tipper of a Damian Lillard trade. Because that was the only thing I saw that was like there was news about it. Maybe there was some. I know Toronto was like listed, was being brought up recently, and that made sense. Toronto is a team that likes to make moves and has historically done that with Masai. And I think it's really interesting. I think the East is so competitive that it makes sense for them to do this. I'll talk about kind of how I feel about it after. But yeah, it was just shocking. And I think it's going to be exciting for a Milwaukee franchise that historically, all the way back, has lost a lot of franchise greats. People don't typically stay there. So they're really trying their best to avoid the fate they've had historically with a one Lou Alcindor not wanting to play there anymore.
Absolutely.
And winning a championship there. So, winning is not everything. Similarities
there between past great and present great a little bit. Just different leadership in the front office this time around.
Yep.
All right, so we've kind of laid out the groundwork here. We told you guys who was involved with the deal, what each team received, and how it kind of affects our team at a slightly smaller scale, right? So now let's dive into a little granular level, right? Let's talk about these teams individually going forward, and we're going to play one of our favorite games here. We're going to do Splash or Trash, right? So we're going to lay out each team. We're going to talk about what happened on each side of this deal, and then I will ask the guys, and I will give myself third choice here to kind of be the tiebreaker or agree above and beyond to whatever they say. But we're going to go right into the Bucks here, right? So, Ryan, I'll go to you first on this one. Ryan, talk to me about how the Bucks look after this deal and whether you think it was a splash or a trash splash or trash for Milwaukee going forward as currently constituted.
All right. Well, I'm going to do my patented not answer the question and say things, and then
There you go.
and then reverse what I say at the end.
Perfect.
That's trademark though, so please don't do it.
Damn
So my two thoughts. I had to really think about this deal like a lot because it was so. I had thought about all the other ones that were brought up, like at least a little bit. This one, I was like, well, that's completely new. I need to process that for a second. As I say, let the synapses simmer for a little bit. And my two thoughts were, one, it increases the variability of the team to a large extent, upwards and downwards, because it reduces depth on the team and it increases top end talent, right? So you're increasing and decreasing your possible results because now an injury is much more effective at limiting your team than it would be previously, right? I've talked about that with other teams that have traded for stars and gotten rid of depth. That happens a lot. It makes sense why they do it, but it really, Phoenix is doing that, right? Like that's something that can really limit you if Dame goes down or Giannis goes down. I think he's turning 29 here very soon, and famously is a bumper and a grinder in the paint. So who knows how long the body will last? I'm not saying this year, but there's a concern there. But there's also the inverse of that it's good that they are accelerating because of that concern. The team is old. We've talked about that a million times. Brook Lopez is, I think, 35. Giannis is again 20, about to be 29, but probably his body's a little older than that. and Chris Middleton's had injury history. This is a team that probably needs to accelerate because of that. So yeah, that's my first thought, is increasing variable. And my second is this the best offense in the league now? Because you're getting rid of Jrue Holiday, who was probably like the third most important defender on the team, to now the inverse of him, which is this offensive superstar. One of the offensive greats. His advanced numbers last year offensively were crazy. Dame's. He was like right behind Jokic in basically every advanced statistic. I think their pick and roll will probably be the best in the league. I think some of the dual pick and rolls they can run with Brook as well, doing kind of what Spain likes to do with the down screen and the paint off the pick and roll. Yeah, the Spain pick and roll, the Spain screen, whatever you want to call it. That could be scary. That's a huge one that no one else in the league can really do. And then the concern about the defense is all I really think about, right? Dame is not a good defender. Has, from metrics wise, been one of the worst in the league. But the defense of Milwaukee is highly reliant on Giannis and Lopez being there. And they are still there. They're going to play drop. And as long as Lillard chases the guy around the screen with like 50% effort, he'll do enough to make it difficult for teams to score. So I think it makes sense. I think everything fits together. I have to splash it, even though they're losing some depth. I really think they have the potential to be the best offensive team in the league now, and they probably have the best two-man game. I think demonstrably, I would say it now that if Lillard doesn't lose a step, kind of like Harden has a little bit, I think they have to be the best two-man game in the business right now. So,
yeah, you make very good points. I think the injury concern is very real, and I assume that we would probably all hit on that at some point. When it comes to my term, I will give you a little pushback there on the best two-man game in the league, but I will save my thoughts for after my boy Gary.
Did we get a splash or a trash from Ryan?
We did.
I splashed it. I splashed it at the end. I did not reverse it and say trash.
All right. I think I missed to say that. Sorry.
Gary, do you have an answer for us for the most pressing question of the evening?
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like my initial thought, right? Like I mentioned, it surprised me a bit. I really like Jrue Holiday and what he brings to that team. I think when they traded for him, I was very very upfront about the fact that I thought it completed that roster for Milwaukee, and they went on to win a title. You know, it kind of showed things haven't gone great after winning the title, but you know, I shouldn't say not gone great, but like in terms of playoff success, right? Now they've got to figure out how to keep Giannis happy. He wants to win titles and whatnot. So you're looking at the end of the season. You're not worried about the regular season with the Bucks. So I thought this trade, in my opinion, at first, right, I was like, I don't know that I like this trade for Milwaukee because, as I mentioned in my initial thoughts, offense has never really been a problem for them. But I started to think about it more, and Ryan, you hit it right on the head. As efficient as Dame was last year offensively, he was behind Jokic, right? Like the historical season that Jokic had, and you're the guy right behind him. 32-7. If they're going to get 32-7 from Dame, then you're going to be able to cover up a lot of that defensive issues that you have because you're going to be able to just outscore everybody. So I like it. And I like it for exactly what Ryan just said as well. It's the immediacy, right? You're going to speed up your clock because Giannis is 29. He's not a guy who's going to be a jump shooter ever, right? So you've got to capitalize while he's still got the ability to bang on the inside and be more athletic than everybody, be longer than everybody. And I think this does that, right? Jrue Holiday, I think, is a guy that you look at him and how valuable he is to a roster, but Dame Lillard is a superstar and has been for, several years now in this league. I think you have to make that trade, right? So now I look at what's the value it brings. Ryan mentioned the pick and roll. He also can just be a guy that if you're going to get Giannis a spell, maybe you don't have them on the floor at the same time, you're not going to lose anything because he's a guy that can go 1-on-5 and be successful. He's done it in Portland for a long time. And if he's still as efficient setting guys up in this offense as he was last year, and he has been for like 3 years, I think it was, he's been like 6.5 or more assists the last 3 years. So he's a guy that can spread the floor, distribute, but the ISO ball, right? That's his strength. And if you're going to rotate it all, or even if Giannis is getting double teams, you can't double Giannis if you got Dame on the other side, right? But if he is getting double teams, you're going to end up with inferior defense trying to stop Dame Lillard. And we know what Dame time can be. So the more I thought about this trade, the more I came off of trash and I'm going splash because of what I also said earlier. Like, this feels like Milwaukee made a move knowing that they want to appease Giannis and keep him in the house. And I think if this does that, right, and which I imagine it does, who doesn't want to play with a guy like Dame? Who doesn't want to play with another superstar? Then that's a splash in itself, not even accounting for what Dame can bring on the floor. I do worry defensively, though. But like I said, if you're scoring as much as this team looks like they probably can, assuming health for Middleton, I know that's a hard thing to assume, but assuming health for him, he's another guy that can space the floor. I think you're just going to outscore everybody every night.
Yeah, we do like to project health on this pod. Mm-hmm. We like to predict health going forward.
Yep. You
never want to speak injuries into existence.
Nope.
I like that you guys both splashed this because that's my initial assessment, right? Obviously, they're going to have point of attack defensive limitations on this roster. Pat Connaughton is there. Pat Connaughton is a very hard-working defender, but he's not a great defender, right? So my assumption is that he's probably going to take on the load of defending the best ball handler on whichever team they're playing against, excuse me. But like Gary mentioned, you're just going to have to outscore everyone on this team, right? Your perimeter defense is not going to be good. Your interior defense will still continue to be very good, right? Provided that Brook Lopez can maintain the defensive level that he's been playing at. And Giannis is kind of the freelancer that erases all issues whenever somebody gets into the paint, right? We've seen him
safety net to have.
Right? He's a dominant defensive player, even as good as he is on offense. He's a machine on both ends of the court and is extremely efficient in all of his movements and seems to put himself in the correct positions. And even if he finds himself out of position, he has the athleticism and range to get himself back into the good position almost instantaneously. I mean, this is a man who goes from the three-point line to dunking the ball in like a step and a half. I mean, those guys don't grow on trees. And Dame has been one of the most special offensive talents in the league. You pair those guys together, it's like Dude, how do you stop that? I mean, you think right off the bat your best bet is probably Philly in the East, but we have no idea what their front or what their backcourt is going to look like going into next year. And it's like, do they have any? Can Tyrese Maxey stay in front of Dame? Right? Can D'Anthony Melton stay in front of him? Like, who knows what it's going to look like in Philly? And for what it's worth, the books have now bumped Milwaukee to the favorite to win the NBA title next year after this trade. Gary and I have this famous saying that goes between the two of us, and it's "fuck Vegas," because they're always right.
Always fucking right.
So that being said, I have to agree with Vegas and splash this trade, right? It just feels like the most logical explanation. This team could be extremely special on the offensive side of the ball, and I'm probably going to bet they're over in every single game for all 82 next year. Okay.
If it's under 240, you might want to just take the over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 245 maybe.
Right. Yeah, you're probably right.
And you mentioned Dame's numbers, right? I don't know that we're going to get 32 out of him this year because he's playing in I'm going to hesitate to say playing in a new system because I don't know what their new system is going to look like with a brand new coach, right?
They're all in a new system, right?
Exactly. They're all in a new system. However, that being said, Dame is going to be asked to do less in this new system, whatever it looks like. He's still going to be the primary scorer and primary ball handler, but now he has a guy in Chris Middleton playing next to him who was basically the best offensive player on that team last year in terms of shot creation. Even though Jrue was still there. Jrue is a phenomenal point guard, but he's not the offensive talent that even Chris Middleton is, right? So projecting health down the road, exactly, much more facilitator, like you said. So projecting health down the road, I love the offensive capabilities of this team, and it will be very interesting to see how they figure out their perimeter defense.
So I was nailed that. We may not see 32 because we may not have to, right? If he's 26 and still getting 7 dimes, Giannis is going to create at the end of shot clocks. Dame's going to create at the end of shot clocks at times too, right? You have weapons, you have options, and that's not even to mention the fact that you just said it, right? Middleton was probably the best shot creator on that team last year. So who do you focus on at the end of a shot clock, right? I think you're gonna have options and bet the over.
Can I add one more thing?
Of course.
That I thought about while y'all were rambling about something. I'm just kidding.
Doesn't even listen to us, Gary.
Right.
Hold on, I'm talking. So I was thinking about this team, and I thought about one concern I have after this trade. So one of the issues that Milwaukee has had is defending bigger wings. They're really good protecting the paint, like I talked about. They were good on the perimeter with Jrue, generally speaking. The problem comes when they face the myriad of big wings that are in the NBA nowadays, the ball handling and shooting wings. I don't know who guards that guy anymore, like Middleton, kind of, but I think he's lost a step defensively. They would often put Jrue Holiday on guys. You can't put Dame on those guys. So maybe that's like the one opening now defensively, because I'm not really actually worried about the guard position that much.
So you're talking just looking at the top of the East, right? You're talking like Tatum, and if you get in the Western Conference, I think the Suns are probably one of those that you're considering a favorite in the West. You're looking at Durant, right? They might not stack up well if you end up with that as a finals matchup. So I think that's a good point because you don't often see Giannis covering guys, covering the best guy one-on-one, because Bentley said it. He's the eraser, right? That's what he's going to do best. He makes up for the mistakes of other people, and he's going to challenge you at the rim. He's not going to be out there defending on the pick and roll. And you can't really switch it, right? Because you don't have anybody else with the size or athleticism to keep up. So yeah, that's a good point, Ryan. That could be the Achilles heel of this Bucks team in a shootout, right? If a wing's going to go for 40 on them.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to put Giannis on those guys. I think that's what makes the most sense to me. He's the best defender in long. It's just, how much does that hurt him on the offensive end? I think that's going to be
that too, right?
Where the potential weakness, when every team has a weakness, I think that might be one of their big ones.
Ryan, if you had bothered to show up or listen to our podcast last week, you would have known that Milwaukee signed Jay Crowder to a deal this year.
Yeah,
So
they're
if
going to
they-
need him.
Yeah, if they go into a game like a series against probably like the best team in the East, Orlando, I don't know, with Banchero down there.
That's
He's another
good.
example, though, right? Once that team matures.
Yeah, or for obvious reasons, Boston is probably the team we're looking at with Tatum.
Yeah.
Crowder might be a guy that we see get more minutes in rotation in a series like that where he's able to take some of the load off. And even if they feel comfortable putting Bobby Portis at the 5 and allowing Giannis to shadow one of those better perimeter guys, those are just a couple of options that they still have on that roster to sneak minutes in, to stash bodies on those offensive guys. But that's a good point you bring
Crowder's
up.
got 6 fouls to use too. So
Yes, he
Yeah.
does.
I mean, you got to feel pretty good if it's like that's your major weakness,
Mhm.
because like how many guys pick that apart? It's most of those guys are in the West actually.
yeah, they really
There's
are.
not as many in the East off the top of
Well,
my head.
Kuzma, dude. I mean, come on. Like,
Well, when you were talking about best 2-man game, I thought you were talking about Kuzma and someone else, like
well,
Corey Kismer.
I mean, hey,
Kyle Kuzma, the big
I was
2-man
thinking-
game.
I was thinking Kispert and Avdia, but
Oh, well, yeah.
No. All right.
One to pass, one to shoot.
Exactly. Nobody knows which one is which. All right, let's get on to our next team here, the team that delivered Dame to Milwaukee. Gary, we're going to go to you first on this one to get your answer, Splash or Trash. How do we feel about this move from a Portland Trailblazers standpoint of view?
I think it's a splash. I think this was probably the easiest of the 3 that we're going to talk about tonight in terms of whether it was splash or trash from the initial perspective, because I like what the Blazers got back, but also they were in a really tough spot, right? Like Dame had made it clear that he didn't want to play for Portland. He was going to go somewhere else. He wanted to compete, whatever excuse he wanted to use to get to South Beach. I think they did really well. And comparing this to what Miami was offering or going to be able to offer, right? Not saying that like Miami was being stingy, but like they just didn't have the assets that we've talked about it, right? Like the assets that Miami was going to be able to give. I didn't think that they were going to be able to really meet what I thought Dame should get back. I love that they got back a really good bargain piece, whether they move him before the season starts or they move him at the trade deadline. I don't expect Jrue Holiday to finish the season with the Blazers unless this is a playoff team, right? Maybe if they're competing for a middle of the pack playoff spot in the West, they probably won't be sellers at the deadline. But I expect this is a team in full rebuild. They're either going to move him before the season starts or at the deadline. And I think he brings back even more assets that you're going to be able to build with. On top of the fact that you moved a disgruntled guy, Dame was not necessarily, the quote unquote typical disgruntled player about it. He was respectful, right? He didn't go out and just make a scene, but you knew he was gone. And I think they did pretty good what they got back and moving Nurkic. I think for them, maybe Ayton's a bargain piece if he goes up there and he gets the run that he's probably going to get in Portland. And maybe he's a piece that they can move, right? So I think the Blazers did really well. They set themselves up for, if these pieces gel and we're a good team, right? But if they don't gel, we've got pieces we can move and we're still in rebuild mode, because this now with the Blazers, once they moved on from Dame, it was no longer we're moving for this year. Which is the state they've been in for 5 years now, trying to just piece together whatever they can to compete with Dame. This is now we're 3, we're 4, we're 5 years away, and we want all of these pieces that we can just start throwing shit against the wall and find our next superstar.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think it gives them a lot more versatility within the front office to be able to shape this roster however they would see best fit going forward, with Scoot very clearly being the future of that franchise. As currently constituted, all things considered, we expect him to be that going forward.
I mean, if their next superstar is already on the roster, which I like Scoot, I think he's going to be, right? That's the ceiling I have for him. You won the offseason essentially with all these other pieces you can build around him with. So I thought they did well. I thought they did really well. When you don't have leverage, it's really hard to do well. I thought they did well.
Yep. Ryan, the moment has come for you to shirk all responsibility in that you're not going to answer my question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Splash or trash this trade for the Portland Trailblazers?
Well, first we have to define what we mean by splash. I'm just kidding.
I did not inhale.
I will answer it first. I am going to splash it. I generally agree with what Gary said. I think getting DeAndre Ayton is a pretty big coup. I know contractually it makes they had to move big numbers around, and getting who I perceive as a top 10 center in the NBA is pretty decent. Jrue Holiday, like you said, even if he's on the team for a little bit, should get you something in trade because he's likely not staying on the team. They'd have a real small backcourt. And if they had if Anthony Simons is also on the court, they'd have one of the smallest teams ever. But this team with Shaedon Sharp, with Scoot, with Aiden, they're not a playoff team, but they're still relevant, right? They're not like completely tanking, which is always a concern, right? Like ticket sales and all these other things. I think from an economic perspective, it's pretty good for them. And I think that Aiden is still young enough. I think he's 25 to be on the timeline, like where he's at his peak, like, nearing the end of his peak while the rest of the team is getting into their peak. And I think that could be a good timeline for him. And he also probably provides a potential trade later if it comes down to that and it's just not working out. But I think I will really splash this if they could move like Jeremy Grant as well. I don't know how because he has a huge contract, but I guess someone will take him. Even just getting off the contract, I think will be big because it's so long. But yeah, I think just thinking about it by itself, I like it a lot. It provides versatility for the present, versatility in the future because those picks are in 2028, 2029, 2030, and that Milwaukee team will be all retired by 2030. So it's unlikely, and I don't think Milwaukee controls a single one of their picks till 2032 or 2031, I guess would be the first one. So it's unlikely they're retooling. It's like you wait out that team, and those swaps should be pretty decent.
Yep. So
I've heard people say it was not a good return for Dame, but honestly, like I don't think it's bad. Like it's not 8 picks because the team clearly didn't want a full rebuild. They want to like maintain some competency on the court.
I think that's the big point, right? Like Portland was never looking for 8 first-round picks, right?
Yeah,
they weren't looking for that. They wanted a couple starters, and it's what they got. Honestly, it's what they got.
Yeah, and the team's not bad. Like that's a team that's going to beat some people. And if they snuck into the play-in. It wouldn't shock me.
Will Ayton ever get a fucking mid-range jumper?
No, I don't think
he
has a turnaround.
He's got a turnaround, right, from 6 to 8 feet away. But give me something from 12 to 15, and he would be. I think people would respect him a lot more. You mentioned he's probably a top 10 center, but I think he'd be one of the 4 to 5 best if he had any semblance of just a mid-range game. I don't need him to shoot from behind the 3-point line. Just give me something from 12 to 15 feet.
Yeah.
As athletic as he is, I just can't believe that he's not able to develop that fucking mid-range.
I prefer he just be a better rim protector.
Well, that too. Yeah. You mentioned he's only 20. It's hard to remember how young he is because he looks like he's fucking 60.
Yeah. Chance to get rid of DPOY. It's not played.
Well played, Corey.
Yeah. I don't think that award goes away anytime soon. It would be very shocking to me if it did. But stranger things, I guess, right?
I imagine the worst defender in the NBA will take you on a bet to see if you can score on them.
Yes. If you can score 3 points on Dame Lillard.
Yeah, right.
I mean, Jalen Green plays no defense, and good luck.
Yeah. All right, so you guys have all laid out very good points. I'm not sure how much more there is to say from me, so I will go ahead and splash this one, right? But I'm going to speak to it from more of a front office standpoint of view or front office viewpoint, right? I really, really, really appreciate what Portland did here. So Dame signs his 4-year extension last year. Then he comes out in July before it even kicks in and says, hey, I want to be traded. And what does Portland do? Okay, we'll trade you. And Dave's like, no, you don't understand. I want to be traded, but only to Miami. And they're like, okay, bet, dude, we'll trade you. And he's like, no, I'm not sure if you heard what I said. Only Miami. And they're like, yeah, bet, dude. No, we heard. We got you. Yeah. I'm not sure we can afford to fly you to Miami. It's very far away, but we'll trade you. And they waited, 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 and they waited. And like Gary said, I don't know if they were looking for 7 or 8 trades or 7 or 8 first-round picks to come back. I think the Gobert deal probably scared a lot of teams off from doing that ever again, probably.
Yeah.
But I mean, this team knew that Dame was not going to want to play for them. He probably would have showed up, and he probably would have kicked ass in training camp, and they could have started the season with him, and he would have wanted to play, right? But he didn't want to be a Portland Trailblazer anymore. But this team did not fall head over heels trying to appease their superstar that's been there for a decade plus and just been the ultimate team guy, right? They waited and they took their time and they tried to find the best deal possible. And in the 11th hour, they got what is likely the best deal possible that teams are offering. Like when they called Miami to see what they were, or when Miami called them, Portland was like, okay, if we're going to do the deal with you, we want Bam or Jimmy. Like that's what it's going to be. And they said, nope. So they said, all right, that's not the best deal we can get. We'll find something better elsewhere. When they talked to Toronto, all things indicated to Toronto not being willing to give up OG Anunoby, which is baffling to me. But whatever. If OG and like 3 picks are the trade, I would have done that in a heartbeat for Dame. There were rumors of Orlando getting involved. I don't think Orlando has the pieces that would be either as valuable on the court or as valuable in trade packages coming back to Portland. Chicago was involved, but it's like, do you want to put one of their guys? Because Levine's not really a trade piece, but he doesn't also fit the timeline there in Portland with the rebuild they're going through and trying to spin up Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe. I do really like them getting in DeAndre Ayton because as soft as a center as he is, with no mid-range game to speak of, like Gary mentioned, I do like his skill set, right? And they play in a conference. They're going to have to play Minnesota that has big men. They're going to have to play Utah, which has big men. They're going to have to play the Lakers, which have a big man. They're going to have to play, obviously, Denver, which has a big man, right? There are teams in the West that have front court depth that this team is going to have to compete with at some point. And they have locked up Ayton on this deal, which is not exorbitant, right? He's making a lot of money, but he's not making tons and tons of money. He's not going to put them in cap hell. And he's young enough to where it kind of makes sense to have a semi-veteran in the room for Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe to kind of spin up and get their wheels going in the NBA full time to where he can still have a positive impact on this roster while they're establishing a culture there in Portland outside of Dame. So I really like what Portland did, as well as getting the 3 first-round picks, basically, for Milwaukee, and Ryan laid it out perfectly. Most of the guys on this Milwaukee team are not going to be in the NBA in 2030 when they get their final pick swap. So it's like, who knows what that final pick is going to be? It could be a lottery pick for all we know. It could be a very, very high lottery pick. And that would just be great for Portland because that's another asset that they have at their disposal to either use, draft a guy, or trade out of it and pick up another 3-and-D guy because that's what everybody's looking for to pair with those young studs they have going forward. So I think we've all splashed this trade. We all really like it from a Portland standpoint, I believe.
Yeah, I really like what you said, Ben, because you and I have often said that Portland was in the worst situation maybe in the league as far as assets and where they were in the cap. And I think you brought up a good point that they really did a good job of getting out of that situation and basically taking the midway route, getting talent back plus some picks. Yeah. And they were in no man's land. Jeremy Grant was not moving the needle for this team to win a championship.
Nope.
And that was their big move. So I agree with you. I think this is about as good of a situation for a team that didn't have a lot of options.
Yeah. All right. Let's take this from the third point of view here. We're gonna go down to the sunny Southwest and speak on our friends in the desert, the Phoenix Suns, brand new ownership. Matt Ishbia does not give a shit about money. He will spend, and they will continue to do that, I assume, for the rest of the decade with those salaries they have on their books down there. Gary, I'm going to go to you first. How do we feel about this one from the Phoenix standpoint of view? Do you splash or trash, my friend?
This is the one I'm the closest to like center on. I waffled on this one a little bit as I kind of evaluated it because I like DeAndre Ayton, despite the struggles that I wish he could fix in the mid range. I like him. I think he's an athletic guy. I think he's gives you a little bit of toughness. Not the defender I thought he was going to be coming into the NBA, but he does a lot of good things for you. But they were clearly ready to move on from him. And because we always assume health on this show, I think they actually upgraded at the center position in some ways. With Nurkic, I think he's a very skilled big. I think he can do a couple things better than Ayton. I think he's a better passer. I think he's a little more kind of savvy offensively. But I say that assuming health, but he's never fucking healthy. So it may end up being a wash for them in the end. They just got rid of the Ayton contract and got the other pieces. But I also like the way they rounded out their roster. This is a team that, Ryan, you mentioned it, right? When you make these big trades for superstars, what do you lose? You lose all your depth, right? I think they got a little deeper at some of the wing / kind of combo guard positions. I like Grayson Allen and what he can do. A little bit of shooting, kind of a grindy, almost grimy defensive guy at times, but he can help you defensively on the wing. I think that they're a better roster today than they were yesterday, or I guess today than they were Tuesday, right? But only kind of slightly because it adds some depth, and I have to assume that Nurkic is going to play the whole year. I think he fits maybe a little better too with what D-Book and Durant are going to play in terms of offensive style. Ayton probably wasn't a great fit there. Maybe he goes to Portland and they figure out how to put him in position and he becomes, a true star at the 5. But I just think that this roster feels a little more complete today, longer, right? The bench is longer, the roster is longer, and they didn't have a lot of room to maneuver, right? Because they traded all their trade pieces away to get Durant, especially. So I like it for them. I'm not in love with this move for them, but I also know that they didn't really have a lot of wiggle room. And I like Nurkic when he's healthy. So I do like this trade for them, but this is the one I waffled on the most because I also like Ayton. So it was a balancing act there, but they added a couple more pieces, rounded out the roster, slightly splash.
Slight splash.
It's
diving.
You get a 3-team trade and like everybody won, right?
Diving competition size splash from Gary. All right, Ryan. Once again, the time has come for Ryan to completely ignore the other two co-hosts of the show and pretend as if we are not asking questions. But I will continue to ask the question anyway. Ryan, splash or trash for Portland, my good friend?
This one sounds like a lot of resentment in your voice.
I was being extremely sincere.
I'm going to choose to ignore it.
Just like he does the rest of the time when he's on
this pod. Yeah, this one's tough, right? I do agree that it's the most middle of the road thing. I'm going to give my thoughts and then say my answer, as I like to do. Nurkic is a better fit for the team than Ayton was. He is a really good screener. The guy's built of bricks in like the heavy way, not like the athletic way like Ayton is. And that's a valuable skill when you have 3 supreme scorers who come off screens and can shoot on pretty much everybody. That's a pretty valuable skill, I would think. He's not going to play a lot of minutes. If he is healthy, which that's a big if, because he's looked bad for a couple of years now. He has not looked very movable. He's looked like a statue defensively. He is a better rim protector than Ayton, even when he's unhealthy. But if he's healthy, that's something they need, right? They need someone to protect the rim. That makes a lot of sense. So someone that screens, someone that protects the rim, someone that's a good passer. Those are all the skills that make a lot of sense with this team. I just have serious concerns that he's not healthy. He broke up. What did he break? His left tibia and his fibula in 2019. I think about my foot hurting and I can't move, so I don't know how he's come back and at his size and done as well as he has because he's survived. But before that, he was an all-star caliber center, a fringe all-star, and it's a concern. It's if they get an 80% version of him, I think they're pretty happy, right? Because they don't need him to score, and some of his quickness will go away. Nasir Little is a wild card, a guy that could play minutes, a guy that could not play minutes. He probably will play a little bit, and but not over my boy Keita Bates Diop, who, as Bentley knows, I love. I agree with Gary. It's good to just get guys who can play because they have so much up-end talent that it's good to just get guys. Grayson Allen, another guy who I'm not sure how much he plays. A starter in Milwaukee, but is he going to play over Eric Gordon? Is he going to play over Damian Lee? Maybe. Those guys are comparable in a lot of ways. So that one's probably a wash to me. He's still good depth if you have injuries and can shoot, but he doesn't really do anything else except for cause fights. And then Keon Johnson, a guy who is hyper athletic, like you said, but has shown absolutely nothing in the NBA. One of the top guys in his high school class, very small, but I think he has a 46-inch vertical. I think he has the highest recorded for a guard ever at the combine. So, that's pretty cool. He just doesn't know how he just doesn't know how to play basketball correctly.
Yeah.
But he's 21, right? He's not on the team probably to play very much. And it's probably a good team for him to learn from. Eric Gordon's there, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, guys who Bradley Beal's a smaller shooting guard, right? It's probably good for him to see kind of what that looks like. Bradley Beal is exceptionally skilled in comparison to Keon Johnson, but maybe if Keon can get 60% of that, we'll feel pretty good. All that being said, I think losing Aiden and the majority of this trade being an unknown, even though I can see why they did it, I'm going to have to trash it. It relies so much on a guy who hasn't been healthy for 3 years being healthy for it to look okay, and I think it looks okay at best. So I have to trash it because of the variables with the injuries. And as an injury procrastinator, I can't talk on this pod. We know he will not be healthy.
Absolutely. It's a very
prognosticator. That's the word.
There it is.
There you go. It's a very egregious way to say that word.
Yeah, too many angles.
Yes, too many angles. Call that man Oppenheimer. So I'm sitting here looking at the roster as currently constituted for the Phoenix Suns, and I filtered it by position, right? Starting with center. And I'm just going to read some names to you guys. Udoka Azubuike. Everybody remembers him from Kansas, right?
Yep.
Love that dude.
Stud.
Not a great NBA player. He's on a two-way contract currently. Yusuf Nurkic. Got it. We've talked about him. Chimezie Metu. Yep, that's another guy on the roster. He's 6'9".
He's a guy.
He can play. He was decent in San Antonio.
I didn't say he was bad. I just said of all the guys on the roster, he is one of them. The only player currently on their roster listed at or over 7 feet tall is Bol Bol. So if you are telling me that this team, who plays in the same conference as the Portland Trailblazers, where I just laid out all of the other teams in the Western Conference that have depth in their front courts, you're telling me that Yusuf Nurkic is going to give you a healthy season into the month of June, which is where this team wants to go. I am not sure that there is enough front court depth to hang with the big dogs in the West.
I haven't shaved in months.
All mine grows in on my neck. You have the perfect podcast, dude. Neck beard and everything.
I'm not even kidding. I literally haven't shaved in months.
It's true. It's true. So I'm going to trash this trade, and I kind of laid out one reason there, right? They don't have the front court depth. They let Jock Landale walk this season. He's now in Houston. I thought that was kind of foolish of them. He was a guy that gave them very real minutes in the playoffs last year when Ayton was ineffective on defense against Denver mostly. That being said, I've stated many times tonight that I do like DeAndre Ayton. I thought he was going to be a valuable member of this team going forward. I hate it now, like the more I talk about it, because they have nobody to play center on this team now because, like Ryan said, Jusuf Nurkic is not going to be healthy. And I hate forecasting injuries, and I do my best not to do that, but that man hasn't been healthy in years. That being said, I will give you another reason why I dislike this trade for Phoenix. Would one of you like to jog my memory and remind me which number draft selection DeAndre Ayton was?
I think he's right after Doncic and Trae Young.
Yes.
He was third, right?
Not quite. Not quite. Almost.
Oh.
He was a number 1 overall draft pick.
Yep.
In the NBA draft. And they got exactly 0 draft picks in return when they sent him out the door. Now, I understand it's not all about draft compensation. You got players and you got off his contract. Got it. Understood all of those things aside. They have no draft compensation left after all of the deals that they've made throughout the years, right? They brought in Bradley Beal, which I thought they kind of fleeced Washington, but that's another story. And they brought in Kevin Durant, right? Like that's a lot of assets out the door. And then they just let their 4th best player walk out the door as well for Jusuf Nurkic. I understand why the move was made. I get it from a Phoenix standpoint of view. But I don't understand how you can make this deal and not bring back any sort of draft capital.
No,
Uh,
that just doesn't make sense to me. So I trash it.
You're right. I mean, you're talking a 1-1, right? Went out the door and you got back a guy that you guys are right that it's safe to assume that Nurkic is going to be hurt, right? My whole idea of moving this over the center line hinges on the fact that I guess I'm just assuming Nurkic is going to be healthy, right?
Right.
But you guys aren't wrong. And for them to not get any draft compensation back, or at least maybe a young piece or something along those lines, I think you're right? They got a bunch of middling players in addition to Nurkic. If Nurkic miraculously does stay healthy, I think they got a higher end guy. But no, you're right to call them out for that, not getting any draft compensation. But they're another team, right? They don't control any of their picks for the next 2 decades, right?
Right.
But they're all in. They're all in on this trio. And
it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch.
Oh, for sure. This is gonna be the All-Star game. Basically, they're just gonna go down and shoot the ball. If you make it, you get the points. If not, we'll meet you down here and we'll score.
Yes, it's certainly gonna be an interesting team comp they have running up on the court. And I hope Nurkic does stay healthy because Ryan stated it, and I think you agree with him that is a good team fit for Nurkic, right? Like he's not going to be asked to be the offensive guy, and if they can get him to be engaged on the defensive end and kind of get back to what he was early in his career, I think that he'll be very effective for them.
Even 70% of that, I think, would be help for them.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so we're gonna shift here real quickly towards the end of the show, right? We're gonna talk about Jrue Holiday, as well as the news coming out that Jeremy Grant is going to be put up on the trade block. However, he cannot be moved until December because of the way the CBA works and the deal that he signed, right? So we will push off the Jeremy Grant stuff until later in the season, whenever we do our trade deadline pod and however that plays out down the road. So we're going to focus now on Jrue Holiday. I didn't really pose this question to you guys going into the pod, but I think we've all kind of thought about it. We've had about 24 hours now to really digest this move. Jrue Holiday is eligible to be traded before the season starts. He's eligible immediately to be moved without actual salary matching from whatever team. They just have to eat the cash that he leaves on their books whenever he goes out the door, right? So it's kind of a hindrance to Portland, but their timeline is set up to where that is not going to hinder them that much, right? So this is basically a strictly basketball point of view type of move. So Ryan, I think I went to you second last time, so we'll come back to you first this time, right? I know it's kind of on the spot, but like I said, we've all had about 24 hours to think of where, as soon as we heard this deal, we're like, Jrue's not playing in Portland, right? Probably, at least not the full season. Ryan, do you have thoughts on where you would either like to see him go or where you think the best basketball fit for him to end up would be?
I think the funniest thing, which is really what I care about, is if they offered him to Miami for the same trade package. We're like,
that
all right,
would be spectacular.
now we think the value is equal.
And then,
Yeah.
and then Dame follows through and doesn't play for Milwaukee. All the
God.
chaos. All the chaos.
That would be wild. I think that's actually a possibility. Maybe not for the exact same thing, but I think Miami's got to be in on Jrue Holiday, right? They would have like some of the best perimeter defense, and then with Bam, like the versatile post. I think that would be really interesting. It fits, I think, their style. He's a great locker room guy. Like probably would be heavily embrace the way they run their teams. I think that would be interesting. I think him going back to New Orleans would be interesting. I just like the probably only way they do that is getting off CJ McCollum, which I don't think is probably possible. But I think before he signed an extension, yeah, just swap him back, like revert time. Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams that want him. I think you could probably like he fits into every team because he's a above average offensive player. He's arguably the best perimeter defending point guard in the league, arguably. He's been an all defensive player for years. I think 5-time all defense. He is a serviceable creator. He is a creative player. He's serviceable at it, above average at it. He's not Dame. Dame is more creative, but he can run an offense if necessary. I mean, if you're on the edge where you're like, I need a piece, this is, I think, a really good fit. Or you want to take the next step and become a competitive team like Orlando, for example, and they can have 7 guards on that team that all want to play the point. There's a lot of options. I think he's one of those players that just fits everywhere, but I think Miami makes a lot of sense. And I think they should be pursuing him with some type of similar package to what they wanted to trade for Lillard. Yeah.
I like that you mentioned Orlando. If Gary doesn't talk about him, I'll bring him up again here in my portion of this. But I agree. He's kind of the guy. He's a chameleon, right? We always talk about players in sports who kind of fit everywhere. And Jrue is a very good example of that. You can play him at both guard spots. And you even mentioned earlier he can guard up on the defensive end. So if you have a super small backcourt, it's not the worst thing in the world to try to fit him in there. Actually, I saw a funny graphic today of potential starting 5 in Portland, and it was Scoot, Simons, Jrue, Jeremy Grant, and DeAndre Ayton. And I was like, oh, brother, that's we're looking at a real small team there.
Yeah,
but,
three guys under 6'3".
Yeah,
or under
like,
6'4".
Yeah, that's tough.
Simons might be 6'5".
Yeah, but he's tiny.
Yeah,
he's tiny.
He's little.
Yeah. All right, Gary. What about you, man? Do you have thoughts or a preferred location for Jrue?
Yeah, I like all the points Ryan made, right? He fits everywhere, right? He's the guy that you can plug into any roster across the NBA. If you're a contender and you think that having a guy at the point guard position that, say you're an Eastern Conference team and suddenly you need a guy that can cover Damian Lillard, right? I think he's a guy that would be a very good fit. And I'm targeting right now a team that I think should expect to see Milwaukee in the playoffs and should look at their roster and say, I don't have a guy that can counter Dame Lillard. I have a guy, or I had a guy last year that could counter Dame Lillard, but I don't have him anymore. He's in Memphis now. And I look at Boston, and I think that adding a guy like Jrue, and I don't know what all they would give up necessarily, but I think they've got some pieces on that roster that they could send back. And they always seem to wheel and deal with picks in a very, effective fashion. I think they could package up a nice little package for Portland. And I think that if you put Jrue alongside Jalen, no left-hand Brown, and Jason Tatum and KP, I think that that's a guy that can facilitate for your offense, gets out of the way, right? He's not a selfish point guard. He's not a guy that's going to say, I need the ball at the end of the shot clock. He's going to get out of the way, and he says, I'll see you on the defensive end after you get a bucket, right? So I look at Boston, and I think that is potentially a move that could really put a stamp on that roster to say, this is us. And you mentioned, right, the odds swung in the favor of Milwaukee once they got Dame, but I personally would swing Boston to my championship favorite if they were to add Jrue Holiday to that roster. Obviously, they're going to lose some pieces, but I think that he, alongside what they've already got there with that three-headed monster, I think he finishes that roster out, and he gives you what you lost with Marcus Smart on the other end of the floor. I really like the potential fit there. I like Orlando potentially because of all the athletic and the young guys, maybe a good fit there as a leader, right? A guy that can help them grow up and mature and learn how to play in the NBA. I don't hate New Orleans because I think that roster is teetering on being close, right? Again, assuming Zion's going to play. But I do think there's a ton of possibilities, right? All these teams that are kind of fringe contenders would benefit from him. But I look at Boston and I say, man, that's an opportunity. If they're looking at this and they say, we're ready, right? They've been ready for years, but this could really be the last kind of nail in the closet you're building for the next Larry O'Brien. It makes too much sense to me, man. That's a position for them that is not a strength. It's not a weakness. I wouldn't say it's a weakness, but when you can add that guy to that, I think that Boston immediately becomes my NBA championship favorite.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with everything said about Boston. My only hesitancy there is being able to make the money work from the Boston standpoint. But Jrue Holiday just feels like a Brad Stevens guy. Yeah. Like if you had told me Jrue Holiday played a Butler, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like he's from Indiana. I got it.
Yeah.
I'm going to touch on a couple of them. I'll start in the West. There's a player who plays in the West who all he does is make the playoffs. His name is Chris Paul. He's going to make the playoffs with Golden State. I don't know how he exactly fits on that roster. Steve Kerr came out the other day and said that they have 6 starters. And last I checked, we have Dr. Naismith on this podcast tonight. Dr. Naismith, how many players play on a single team on the court at one time?
In the NBA, 5.
Okay. All right. Just double checking. Yeah. So I'm not sure as the resident numbers guy myself, I'm not sure where Steve gets 6 and 5. The numbers that doesn't work for me. But that's an interesting landing spot. You know, sending Chris Paul, who's obviously in the twilight of his career, sort of like an Oklahoma City thing he did where he was playing with Dennis Schroeder and Shea. You pair him with Scoot and Simons and kind of have him mentor them along, right? And then if he wants to try to ring chase next year, I guess he kind of picked Golden State. I'm not really totally sure how much of influence he had on that deal. So that was one that kind of like stuck out to me is maybe you bring Jrue over to Golden State and he plays that Clay defensive role that Clay can no longer do, right? Another one I thought of was a team who lost a significant player from their roster last year and went cross-conference. Denver lost Bruce Brown. If they could find a way to get Jrue Holiday in there, I think that would be a huge boost, playing him in the backcourt alongside Jamal Murray, right, kind of filling that Bruce Brown role, being the glue guy, the facilitator, the best defender on the court, aside from Aaron Gordon, right? And they have the pieces to do it, right? They can send Michael Porter Jr. with that big contract up to Portland and allow him to really flourish into the offensive player he would be playing with a point guard. Not that Jamal's not a good point guard, but you kind of get what I'm saying, right? Take a larger role in the offense. And I think Jrue fits perfectly in what Portland or in what Denver would want to
take off of Jamal Murray too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And Christian Brown, I really like Christian Brown, but I'm not sure he's ready to be like a starter in the NBA right now. But maybe he proves me wrong. Another one I thought of is like a Lonzo for Jrue Holiday trade straight up. And
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah. You want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, I actually was in the trade machine trying to do it, and
Nice.
I did. There's no picks in the trade machine, but I did a Lonzo Ball, Patrick Williams, Dalen Terry for Jrue Holiday.
Yeah.
So they absorb Ball's contract because he's not going to play under that contract. I don't think, more than likely. You get Patrick Williams, who like still a prospect if he ever stays healthy. You probably need to trade like 2 first, and then Chicago's like might actually be pretty good because he's like the small version of Lonzo Ball.
Right.
He's exactly what they need on that team.
Yeah.
That would be if they could figure that out. I don't know if they'll take a $20 million contract that has no player attached to it, but I was thinking about that just now. That's funny you said that.
And Gary and I talked in our pod last week when we did the division preview that we didn't feel like Chicago had made a big enough splash in their offseason to really move the needle on their win total or their projection to make the playoffs or whatever, however you want to forecast next season going forward. And I think a Jrue Holiday deal, and if you can get off that Lonzo Ball contract where he may not ever play again, bring in a guy who fits perfectly in what they want to do there, I think that'd be fantastic for Chicago. I think it would increase their odds a ton to make the playoffs in the East next year. And then there's my favorite, right? I really would like to see him in Orlando. They need veteran. That team is so young. They need veteran presence and a veteran guard down there. Take your pick of whichever guard you want, or 2 of them, whatever you want to send back to Portland. As long as you keep Franz and Paolo and preferably Anthony Black down there on that roster for a little bit of size, I think that team could be. I think the team could make a huge leap next year, right? They have 2 studs that play wing for them. You bring in Jrue Holiday, solidify the backcourt. You play Anthony Black a bunch, get him a lot of experience. They're going to win a bunch of games just based off of athleticism and skill. Maybe not like basketball savvy or whatever, but they're going to play harder and they're going to play better. I think they have better players than a lot of the teams in the NBA, right? So if you throw Jrue Holiday in there, kind of solidify everything, get him headed in the right direction. That's my favorite move. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I feel like that would be something that would be beneficial to both sides, likely. All right. Any other places we didn't touch on that y'all want to highlight real quick?
There's so many. Like we said, it's like I'm looking at the trade machine and I'm like, there's like 12 teams I could put them on and be like, that makes sense. So that's good for Portland, right? Because they can be like, we got all this activity. People are like, we want them. You can play that against each other, right? Like they should be able to get a decent offer for him. Like he's not a superstar, but he's an all-star. I mean, he's an all-star guy. He's been an all-star. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's so like I said, there's probably 15 teams that would like to have him, and he can play so many roles. The mentor, he can play the finishing piece, he can play the transition piece into a competitive team like Orlando might be, right? Like it just, I mean, the world is their oyster at this point.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, I have no idea.
They truly have a piece though that they can kind of just, what's the best deal? Do they want draft capital for him? Maybe that's what they're looking for. Do they want another player, right? Are they looking for a different player that they don't have? Because you're either going to play him alongside Scoot, right? Or one of those two is going to get diminished play time, and you're either hurting yourself in terms of value for Jrue to trade, or you're hurting Scoot's development long term if you're not going to play them alongside each other. So, realistically speaking, they probably would just play them alongside each other if they don't trade Jrue before the season starts. But from a long-term perspective, you don't want to stunt the growth of Scoot. You don't want to diminish the value of Jrue. I think right now they're kind of in the catbird seat, as you said, or the world's their oyster. Ryan put it perfectly. Just find the best deal, whatever that is for them right now. And if they're trying to stay relevant, then you go find the best player that somebody's gonna be willing to give you.
And Drew's not going to complain about 90% of places that they probably want to send him to, right? Like he's not one of those guys. He's like, I'll just go play. Like
I just want to play ball.
Yeah, whatever. Like send me wherever you want to send me. I'm going to be ready to go. Like he won like Sportsman of the Year, like in the NBA. Like he's a famous locker room presence.
Yep.
He's going to be good wherever you send him. So
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're running up on time here, so I was gonna ask how do we think that Miami approaches this going forward, but we can delve more into that on another podcast, right? I will just make one quick note about that. I'm very excited for the Miami fans. They get to watch what I can only assume is probably one of the 6 or 7 best players in the NBA in Tyler Hero for another season down there. They've spent the last 2 months convincing us that he's, just generational talent that just that Portland should be clamoring to get on their roster. And now they get to keep him in Miami. So very clearly they're going to be one of the best teams in the league, right?
Yeah.
Why would Portland even want Tyler Hero? They have 3 Tyler Heroes on their roster.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't get it.
Doesn't it feel like right now, though, that like this is kind of the wicket that Miami's now got to be desperate, right? Because Bentley, you've brought it up a few times when we've talked about Miami. Like they let Gabe Vincent walk.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to figure that position out, right? Like they don't really have a guy that they're going to say, yep, that's our guy for 65 games, and he's going to lead us on a playoff run at the point guard position, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see potentially a fairly desperate Miami team that's going to have to up the ante, and maybe they hurt that roster to try to find that positional fit. Maybe are they going to offer a better package to Portland for Jrue Holiday than they did for Damian Lillard?
I would call them and offer the same package. I'd be like, hey, let's run it back, dude.
I would say sure, same, right? But is Portland now going to say, we want a little more? And then is Miami going to be desperate and have to give them more? That would be an interesting outcome, right? If they offered a bigger package than they did for Damian fucking Lillard, because they're desperate now, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not drafting Jaime Jaquez would have been beneficial to your trade packages. It's like he's the perfect Miami fit, but also we would like to trade him for Damian Lillard.
Yeah.
It's like
he's the perfect Portland fit.
Yeah. From the West Coast, like it just makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
He's a Pac-12 guy, dude.
Yeah.
Dirty.
He fits your timeline.
Yeah.
He's 25. He's young.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be interesting. The NBA is always interesting, right? But the player movement stuff makes it so much more exciting, and it'll be certainly a roller coaster to watch whatever happens with Jrue Holiday, because he is such a good player, right? And he's chameleon. It'd be awesome to see him in San Antonio. Actually, now that I think about it, that'd be really cool too. Not great for him, but
yeah, I think from a roster fit and what San Antonio needs perspective, I think Jrue would be a great fit there. But I don't want to see Jrue go down there and struggle for 3 years while the team grows up.
Yeah,
straight up for Wembanyama.
Maybe they trade him to, I don't know, like Dallas, run a 3-guard system in Dallas.
Once Kyrie becomes tradable, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that there's like a 3-team trade.
Especially if they struggle out the gates.
Yeah.
Well, you guys heard what Kyrie said today, right? Or was it yesterday? He said, I wish I had been drafted by Dallas because the way they welcome you in and embrace you as a player.
That's what Dallas is known for.
Good for him.
Yeah, all right, bud. Okay, buddy. We're those circular memes where it's like, this is where we're at in the timeline. Yeah. It's now all peace and love with Kyrie Irving. Then the season starts. Then he gets unhappy. And come on, dude. It's every fucking year we see this shit out of Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Pitbull guy.
He's on that ayahuasca retreat that Rodgers was on. He's feeling really good. Peace, love, and kumbaya.
Damn, all right, boys. 6 weeks to tip off.
Yes.
We're almost there. We're to regular season tip off, I believe. I know it's tip off. I forget which one it is.
Preseason's pretty close.
Yeah, preseason hockey has already started, so NBA's got to be soon.
Yep.
I was gambling on that the other night.
Best time of the year for a Rockets fan.
You know you're a degenerate when you're betting on preseason.
Look, dude, one of my favorite gambling tips throughout the year is when you lay down to go to sleep at night, scroll through the live hockey games and pick an under or an over that you like, hammer it, go to sleep.
I'm betting the Canucks to win the championship this year. I think they've really turned it around.
I wonder what the odds would be to take any Canadian team to win the cup.
Edmonton's probably not bad.
Right, but no Canadian team has won it in forever.
Right, it's been what, 30 years now?
It's been a while.
It's been a long time.
I really do think Vancouver's looking a lot better. They got rid of their best player, Bo Horvat, and now they'll be good.
He was in the way.
Yeah, he was a problem.
At Chicago, they can't have 5 bad pro
Golly.
teams in their city, and they got Connor Bedard, number 1 overall. They got to be good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, was that not the most fucking Tim Duncan lottery fucking draw
Right.
ever? Oh, Chicago blew the fucking tank job. We'll give him top pick anyway.
Can I give my prediction for tonight? The game that's
Yeah,
about to start.
I was going to tail us off with a pick.
Oh,
go for it.
Sorry, I didn't mean.
No,
to
go
jump
ahead.
in.
Last
time I was on this pod with Gary, I gave a Lions prediction. I said they would beat the Chiefs.
Nailed it too.
Opening game, and I had said not the spread. I said take them straight up.
Money line.
And was I right? Yes. So
Sure.
I will go 100% Lions here, and I will say they'll win by at least 10 tonight. I know the spread is like 2.5, but I think they're going to win by at least 10. That's my prediction.
That's a big line at Lambeau too.
Yeah. What do those guys know?
Well, the Packers have only beaten the Lions 23 out of the last 26 times they've played. That's all.
Yeah, but the Lions have beat them, I think, like 2 out of the last 3, right?
Yeah.
The Lions are a better team.
I'm on Packers plus 3.5. So I took an alternate and I parlayed it with a couple player props. But what are you going to do, right? Gary, do you have a pick tonight?
I do. I'm on Packers money line tonight.
I like it. You're looking at
Lambeau.
It's moved all the way to plus 108, plus 102. Oh, is the game on?
It's like starting right now.
It's kicking off right now. I think probably just got done with coin flip or whatever. But yeah, I'm on Packers money line. Aaron Jones is back as well. He spreads that offense out. AJ Dillon really struggles running the ball against teams like Detroit. I think that I think Aaron Jones is just going to be able to get the edge more. Really good in the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Love has looked the part. Sorry, NFC North, but the fucking Packers might have done it again.
My man knows.
And Christian Watson's healthy. He's a guy that can stretch the field a bit. So we'll see. I think at home, that was the big thing for me. I think if this game was in Detroit tonight, I probably would pick the Lions.
Vince Lombardi's not walking through the door, Gary. Let's get over Lambeau.
That floor's kind of good.
Jim Ringo is not playing center for the Green Bay Packers, okay?
Oh, boy.
Down.
All right, boys. We've gotten our picks in.
He's not coming through the door.
Yeah, Doc Hudson not there. All right, y'all. So we got our picks in tonight. We got a Packers money line selection. We have what did we say? Lions minus 9.5.
10?
Yeah. I'd take them. I would take an adjusted line at minus 9.5. I would take.
All right.
I would bet it.
You get some real juice on that too, because it's only 2 right now.
Yeah.
Let's see. Minus 9.5 for Lions is currently plus 550.
Boy.
I just got a bonus at work, baby.
Yeah, put your money where your mouth is, big dog. Let's see it. All right, boys. Thank you all for being here, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate you so much. We hope you enjoyed this off-season edition Blockbuster trade special. Dame to Portland. Thank you so much. We will see y'all same bat time, same bat channel next week. We are out.